Welcome to the podcast. We have a familiar face and actually someone who's now being promoted because once you've been on the podcast once, as Simon Ledbetter knows, you're now a friend of the show. So welcome back, Paul Jamieson.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me back.
Now, I'd love to give you an intro here, but everyone knows what you do. You're like the king of property stats. So, as if by magic, you've just released your property stats for Q3. So, you're coming on today to give everyone sort of the lowdown about what on earth is going on in the local marketplace.
Yeah, so one of the things we do at 20A is a quarterly property and home mover report, which basically looks at the state of the property market. So yeah, it's hot off the press, and what it does is we've compared Q3 24 to Q3 23 to see what's happening in the market, sales and rentals. So yeah, we can have a chat about it.
Good, excellent. And that's obviously a bit more up to date because I know historically everyone used to always compare 2019 used to be like the comparison year, didn't it? Kind of like the one
Yeah,
everyone went back to. So it's nice we've got kind of a nice comparison sort of last year versus this year.
yeah.
So kick us off. Let's start off with sales. So most people listening to this, I think, are probably in the sales part of the world. So how are sales looking compared to last year?
Yep. So if we kind of take a step back, I suppose, before I jump straight in. So in the last year, there's been inflationary pressures, obviously higher interest rates than we've had for years and years, and general cost of living challenges. But actually, in Q3, it's the first time in 4 years that we'd had a rate reduction. So that was positive news, and it seemed to, in that's the corresponding data shows that actually the market is pretty good in sales. So with that rate reduction, new instructions were up about 9% versus the Q3 23, and demand was up a stonking 24%. So it appears as though that rate reduction has really kickstarted the market. There's properties coming on, and there's plenty of buyer demand. So all that pent up demand's kind of come to fruition. There's lots of deals coming along. So really, the election hasn't really affected the market. If anything, actually, it's improved on where we were the year before. Um, Transaction wise, though, which is what most estate agents probably care about, because if you're no sale, no fee, that's when you get paid, and that's when money hits the bank account. Transactions are only 4% up on the previous year. So an estate agent listening to this, the front end activity is probably really, really positive, but it's probably a little bit frustrating because it's not corresponding to what's in the bank account. But the good news is that is coming. So transaction wise, in July and August, they were a lot higher than the year before. And what we're seeing is the first half of the year was really slow for transactions because actually the previous Q3 and Q4 was quite poor in terms of sale agreeds, which obviously take on average 3 to 4 months to come through. So the first half of the year, completion wise, was quite poor. But what we're seeing, I think the second half of the year will be a bumper year for completions. So stick in there, and hopefully all those completions and all that money will start coming through.
That's good news. So
The
that's
only
kind of so that's sort of
Yeah,
working its way through the pipeline at the moment, effectively. And
yeah,
thinking out loud here, we're kind of saying, the inflation figure came out yesterday, day before, whenever it
yeah.
was, sort of thing, and that's obviously below the 2% line in the sand they're looking for. So you would think there's going to be another Bank of England base rate cut off the back of that. So do you think there's going to be? I appreciate we're talking about the Q3 side of things, and I'm just
Yeah,
fast forwarding on to Q4 straight away.
yeah.
But do you think that rate reduction that should come is then going to kick another bounce into the market, and we can have the same thing all over again?
So theoretically, yes. And the fact that demand's nearly 25% up, that's great news for the start of next year, because actually all those should complete in kind of January next year. So again, completion wise, the start of next year should be a lot higher. So theoretically, I think, yeah, there will be another rate reduction. The only caveat to all of this is the budget.
Oh
So
yeah,
that is
yeah, quite, yeah.
that's the kind of slight unknown with all of this. And yeah, the new government is being accused of kind of talking kind of the market and confidence down a little bit, and there's lots of rumors going on, so no one really knows for sure. So if the budget's relatively okay, I think, yeah, the Q4 should be really, really strong again. But I will just caveat it with that.
The budget caveat, absolutely. It's a big one.
And so yeah, so in terms of supply and demand, which is how we measure new instructions and sales agreed, really, really strong quarter. In terms of prices, so the average asking price in Q3 was 436,000.
Wow.
That's the instruction price before everyone goes, that can't be right. So the actual kind of completion price is a lot lower than that. And actually the but we kind of measure asking prices. So that's actually fairly flat. It's around the same the year before. So prices haven't really changed too much. What and I suppose what that points to, because that the average listing price obviously at 436,000, the completion price is a lot lower than that. And what we've done is actually, out of all the concluded listings this year, about 40% of those have had a price reduction, or at least one. So it still points to the fact that there's still kind of some unrealistic pricing in the market, which, I mean, we talk about this all the time. There are people out there who will always overprice, but yeah, it has been a feature of 2024. There've been a lot of price reductions, a lot more than previous years. So yeah, I mean, prices are fairly flat, but again, to estate agents listening to it, they're probably more concerned about the sale agrees and completions, which look strong.
And what's the difference between, so you mentioned the average asking price there was 427, did you say, in that sort of
Yeah,
ballpark?
436.
Oh, so close. And what's the average agreed or average completed price? What's the difference between those two? Basically, what's the size of the overvaluing on average, effectively?
Yeah, so I haven't got the exact figure to hand. I can get it, but yeah, it's kind of it's a lot lower. It's probably a good kind of 8-9% below that.
Okay.
But it's slightly misleading without going down the rabbit hole, because obviously the average listing price doesn't necessarily equate to kind of the average listing
Sure.
price. It might be a higher proportion of expensive properties coming to market, which then kind of makes it like overinflates that figure. So I don't have it to hand. I can get it and perhaps post it on the link when you
Yeah, absolutely fine. Well,
later on.
I've always wanted to do one of these. If you are struggling for price reductions, I want to know some really good stats about why you should get price reductions, how it really helps your business. I've recorded a podcast on it, so go back into the podcast list. There's a podcast called The Price Reduction Special, and as if by magic, it's all about price reductions, why you should get them, how you should get them, how important pricing is up front. So there you go. Shameless plug for my own podcast. Why you listen to my own podcast?
Perfect. um,
So what else have you got on the? Is there any more on the sales side before we move on to that?
no, I think that's a good summary of where we are on the sales side. I suppose the only fly in the ointment is the letting side and private rented sector. So there's lots of press at the moment on this. You've got an issue that landlords are exiting. I'll get to that in a sec, but we are tracking this quite carefully as a business, and that without doubt, landlords are exiting the market. That's not even up for debate, and I'll go into that in a sec. But the reason they are doing is there's concerns over new legislation. So you've got your writers' rents bill, which is kind of looking like it might come in soon, which is scaring a lot of agents. A lot of our clients are kind of scared by that. It affects both estate agents and landlords, actually, because estate agents could possibly lose quite a lot of their rental revenue. They've already got pressures of a lot of landlords going to open rent instead of using a letting agent. And landlords are also concerned about potential EPC legislation and having to do lots of work on their house to get it to EPC rating C. There's rumours of capital gains tax rises. So there's lots of kind of rumour and stuff which is unsettling landlords, and we are seeing them exit. But I suppose this is all bad news for tenants, and all of this stuff is really to try and help and protect tenants. But the effects of these landlords leaving, amongst other things, is that for tenants, the prices are going to continue to go up because there is just such a shortage of stock, and it's not going away anytime soon. And it's again then equally difficult for first time buyers to save the deposit to actually buy. Because in many cases, many regions across the UK now, it's cheaper to buy than to rent because rents have increased so much. So if we just delve into Q3 a little bit, so supply, which again we measure as new instructions, there's been a slight drop. So it's 0.5% down versus Q3 last year. So that's new instructions coming to the market. In terms of let agreeds and lets, they're both up by about 8-9%. So again, new stuff going to the market is decreasing, but we're still renting out more properties. So landlords are exiting, tenants are staying put longer because they know if they move out and move
Yeah,
place, the rents are going to be £200-300 more. So
yeah.
actually, their length of residency, they're going right. I don't want to move. I'm just going to stick here and hope my landlord doesn't put my rent up. So it's kind of self perpetuating. It just means that rents are rising. So the average asking price now for rental properties in Q3 is about £1,900 per month
Oof.
across the UK.
And did I see a stat in your report? And it was something like in London, 50% or 56%, 57% of all people's salary is now spent on rent. I was just like, that is a painful figure to read.
Yeah, it's a lot, and it's a real issue. There's just such a shortage of stock for the reasons I've pointed out that it's going. I mean, the rate of rises is slowing. That's for sure, because it's just not sustainable. People need somewhere to live. So the rate of price rises is slowing, but it's still not coming. The overall prices aren't coming down. So it's, I mean, for our view as a business, this is a kind of real crisis that the government have to get a handle of it, and I'll let the listeners decide whether they're going about it the right way or not. But
Yeah, I'll bite my tongue on that
arguably not, based on the conversations I speak to people about. But just back and just to go back to the landlord's exiting point, we've done some really interesting research on this, because everyone kind of rumors they are exiting, but it's to what extent. So the way we calculate this is we obviously we track all the new sales instructions coming to market. What we can do is work out, were they previously rented out. So we go back 3 years. So in the last 3 years, was that property previously rented out? And they're at the highest rate for a decade. So in Q3 24, about 11.5% of all sales instructions across the UK were formerly rental properties. And that's higher, as I say, than it's been for the last decade. So that definitely points to landlords exiting. It's across the board as well, in all regions that's happening. But the key to that stat actually is in London, which is the main market for the rental market. A high proportion of rental properties happen in London for obvious reasons, but 47% of all London instructions were previously rented. So nearly half of what's coming on the market is landlords kind of trying to shift their properties. Now we don't know, it's too early to say where those properties are going. Some of that will naturally get snapped up by other landlords or kind of the kind of corporate landlords who will rent it out again. So not all of that will exit the private rental sector, but a lot of it will still. And again, it's just going to make the situation worse. But there definitely, I think anecdotally, if you ignore the data, there just seems to be a bit of a situation where landlords have had enough, they just want to get out and get on with other things.
Well, I was chatting to one of my clients this morning, and they manage 100 properties or so, roughly speaking. And I said, look, if you spoke to your landlords recently and had a conversation with them and said to them, what's your plans for the future? You're looking to, keep your stock where it is and just kind of keep your 1, 2 houses rented out. You look to buy some more, you look to sell them off, sort of thing. And it was like, well, I'm kind of going to stick my head in the sand over it and just kind of see what happens. I was like, no, that's completely the wrong attitude. You should be proactively on the phone to your landlords. If they want to sell it, they're going to want to sell it. So just have a conversation with them, and it'd rather be through yourself than someone else. If they want to buy some more and buy other properties that have tenants in situ already, at least you know about it rather than shop around to other agencies. So it's definitely not a case of putting your head in the sand on this one. If you've got a landlord database, speak to them and say, have you been keeping track of Section 21 and reform, all those bits and pieces going through? What's your plans for the future? What do you want to do, and get ahead of that curve rather than just kind of catching up with it later down the line?
Yeah, and I still think there's opportunities there for really good letting
For
agents,
sure.
because one of the things is, I mean, again, not all this has been legislated yet, but with the Renters' Rights Bill, landlords are kind of worried that they're going to get a bad tenant and not be able to get rid of them. But actually, serving Section 21 is quite rare anyway. And actually, if you're a landlord and you reference and do really good referencing and stringent referencing, get good people in, it shouldn't really necessarily be an issue for you. I think there's an opportunity. I touched on open rent earlier. So open rent have nearly 20% share of the lettings market now. And most and all of that growth is landlords previously using a letting agent decided they could do it on their own. If I was a letting agent, I would be trying to work. I would try to speak to all these open rent landlords to say, with the legislation changes, with all this coming on, it's harder to make money professionally as a landlord. You don't want to get caught up. We can manage all of this for you. Yes, you'll have to pay a slightly higher management fee than you would with just listing your property of open rent, but the hassle that goes away, and you don't want to get stuck with a bad tenant. And if we can do all this property for you, there's still long term. If you think of owning a property long term, there's still money I think to be made, and I think you've got to, as a letting agent, just show the value you can offer. If you can't if you can't offer any value or differentiate yourself, then I don't blame landlords going to open rent. Why should they pay you more? But there are some really good letting agents out there that we both know, and I think if you can demonstrate and get that message across, there's still opportunities out there. I read something today again. It's my time of recording. I heard rumors that actually the capital gains tax changes might not come in, even though they've been heavily rumored. So again, that comes into play, and we'll see in a few weeks what happens. But again, going back to the crux of all this, the problem for the government is tenants. The available properties are the lowest on record. So since we've started tracking all this, so in September, there were only 259,000 properties available to rent in the whole of the UK. In September 2019, there were 332,000. So there's been a 22% drop in what's available to rent in just 5 years, which is massive. I think someone's got to get a grip on it at some stage. But yeah, luckily I'm not paid the big bucks to do that.
No, quite. Yeah, I think our old Kia's got a tough gig ahead of it there, sort of thing, to turn that around. Because certainly there's not been 20% more houses built over the last 4 or 5 years or so. So yeah, it's definitely a bit of a sticky wicket there, to say the least.
Yeah. Then so we've covered sales, we've covered lettings. The other thing we've looked into quite in depth is the makeup of the estate agency sector, which obviously, again, as you'll know, has changed massively in recent years. So what we found is the adoption of self-employed models is growing rapidly. So these are the likes of EXP, who are probably at the forefront of that. They are, if getting close to being the largest estate agency brand in the UK now, which is pretty phenomenal from a starting start 5 years ago. But there's lots of models out there. There's the agency, there's Keller Williams, there's Avocado, there's the estate agency. There's more. There's self-employed models popping up each month because we're obviously tracking this. What's also happening is a lot of what I'll call traditional agents are kind of realizing actually this is really hitting off, and actually we need to counter this. So a lot of traditional agents with kind of high street branches are bolting on self-employed models. So you can kind of work in the traditional way, or you can come and work for a recognized brand that already has local brand awareness, but potentially your earning potential is more because we'll do a high split and you'll keep more of the fee. So, I mean, we grouped together all the self-employed agents. They've got over 2% national market share, which sounds small, but that's larger than kind of the two largest independent brands or two largest sales brands, which are kind of Purple Bricks and William H. Brown. So collectively, actually, that is a big share, and I think that is growing rapidly. So I posted this on LinkedIn. It might come back and bite me in the face, but I wouldn't be surprised if 20% of sales in 3 years' time were via self-employed models.
Yeah.
Which would be 10 times growth from where we are today, but it is just changing so quickly. I just think it's kind of then the momentum's with them, and it's not going away. And it's interesting how non-self-employed models counter that, because they've got an issue of, if they've got really talented estate agents or vendors, then you can potentially earn a lot more with these models. So they've got to work out ways to retain their talent or train new talent coming through. I think the other thing we've noticed is they're actually good. So if we
That's a relief.
we don't just look at what they're listing and stuff. We actually look at what they sell, at what price, speed of sale, and self-employed agents score really highly in these metrics. So not only are they growing rapidly, they're offering a really good service to the client. That they typically are selling properties, agreeing sales a lot quicker, and the sales progression is a lot quicker because actually they've probably got less deals to deal with, and they've got that more one-on-one service to really concentrate on the sales progression side. Um, and they're getting good. They're agreeing a good ratio of their sales are getting their properties are getting sold. So it's kind of a perfect storm that they're growing and offering a really good service.
Do you think that's because guys and gals, I mean by that, who have gone self-employed have kind of the ones who were great branch managers or great area managers or great sales negotiators, whatever the level is, sort of thing. They thought, I can do this. And they sort of backed themselves because they were banking those numbers. Sort of I wouldn't say the cream, but certainly the top X% have
Yeah.
kind of jumped into self-employed world because they kind of backed themselves slightly more. Do you think those figures are going to get diluted in the years to come and decades to come, sort of thing, because sort of more of the people that probably aren't quite at that same sort of standard are going to start joining, so therefore it's going to get diluted down slightly as it comes slightly more sort of all the guys that were corporate, the best guys left and went self-employed, the guys that
Yeah.
are left in the corporate world then slowly start coming self-employed as well. So therefore they kind of kill that sort of great conversion levels, etc. as well. Do you think or not?
Yeah, I think so to an extent. I think there's a kind of first mover advantage for some of these people
Yeah.
because they've been the early adopters. They've got in there quick, and if they are good estate agents, then they've kind of sniffed out the opportunity and they're doing really really well. I always look at you have these early adopters. Now what I think we're seeing is people have okay, there is something to this. I can see people are making really good money. Some of these models do look quite strong as opposed to some of the online models we've had in the last decade. And now we've kind of got the next stage of people jumping across who are perhaps more tentative, but potentially some of those aren't the right caliber or might be fantastic listers but can't run a business. So but as more people go across, there's potentially some of those won't be as successful. The other thing which I've spoken to some of these self-employed kind of owners about is within although you can take on properties anywhere, most self-employed agents typically have a core patch they concentrate on. The issue I see is the market probably will get so saturated in the future. Whereas in a typical town, you might have had 10 estate agency branches. Now you might have 8 or 9 high street branches, but you chuck in 4 or 5 self-employed models. If you chuck in another 4 or 5 self-employed models and you've got 20 people covering that same town, there's probably not going to be enough listings for everyone. So again, the good ones will be fine, but you might see a lot of the other ones fall by the wayside. Because I think there is a natural saturation point because we just don't have enough listings
Well, exactly.
like we did 10 years ago.
And I was chatting to one of my clients about this the other day, and they I'll keep this quite broad. They were sort of, I'd say, moaning at me, should we say? They were moaning about the situation. They're a self-employed agent in a particular part of the country, and they've got 4 other estate agents in the same brand under the same umbrella with the same marketing, etc., who are
Yeah.
just launching in exactly the same areas they're working at the moment, sort of thing. They're like, great, thanks very much, sort of thing. This is like I see their faces as much as I see my faces, which I appreciate is good to a point, and there's that overlap and referrals of sort of bits and pieces, but it's definitely more competition in your local area off the
Yeah.
back of them coming through.
And that's one of the things. I mean, I'm not an expert in this, but my understanding is to be self-employed, you can't restrict trade. So people have the right to list anywhere. And actually, yeah, if people from the same model are all covering the same area, again, whereas before you could probably, if you were the only person, you could differentiate yourself. Listen, I'm the only self-employed agent in the town. I can offer a one-to-one service. Actually, if there's 4 or 5 people doing that, you then get to stage, oh, I need to think of something new as a USP because actually I'm saying the same things as everyone else. So yeah, I think some of the people that took the risk in the last 3 or 4 years, it's really paid off, but it could arguably get get tougher for them because more people are going to go on and saturate the market. But yeah. But I mean, we'll track this, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think what undoubtedly though is just if you kind of lump together all the self-employed models, it is just going to keep growing.
But it
And
seems like they're getting the compounding effect sort of thing. Because I remember
yeah,
when EXP hit 400 EXPers a little while ago, and then suddenly it was 500. And then suddenly it's
yeah,
like coming out to 600. It's like the actual speed of growth with regard to, I know obviously kind of with regard to not hiring recruiters and everyone kind of recruiting
yeah,
in
yeah.
thing, that has the compounding effect. So if everyone brings on two people, then I mean, it gets enormous sort of thing very quickly. So I feel that's definitely getting some momentum behind it.
Yeah. What's really interesting as well is we've looked at it across different price bands. So the rate of growth is across every price band as well. It's not just bottom of the market, middle of the market. So again, just to I've scribbled down some stats. Between 200,000 and 350,000, there's been 30% year on year growth in that kind of price band. The 350 grand to a million, which admittedly is quite a
It's a
large
broad one.
large price band. Again, 25% year on year growth. And interestingly, a million plus, so the top end of the market, has grown 44% year on year.
Wow.
So people that think, people that might think, oh, self-employed is maybe just for the middle lower market, absolutely not. We're seeing some quite a lot of growth in London, especially where a lot of those properties are likely to be. But there's some quite smart, savvy, self-employed models in London. A lot of them have worked for big London corporates and kind of set up and gone on their way, but they're starting to really kind of make their mark in these kind of higher value areas, and that's actually the fastest growing area, the £1 million plus price bracket.
Good. Cool. Thank
Um,
you so much for coming on today. Dropping gold as always. I'm gonna get you to place this live on air. You're going to come back for another one, surely, in beginning part of New Year. I guess it's going to be sort of January, February sort of time.
Yep, I'll if I'm invited back, I'm happy to be there.
You're
All I would
invited.
say on a final note, Chris, if anyone is listening to this, we could perhaps pop a link to download the report that where I've got all my stats from,
Absolutely.
because
I'll put it in
obviously as
the
an agent, there's gold dust in there, and you can obviously adapt that, write blogs, make it relevant to your local town or region, and start generating business out of it. So it's free to download. Happy to kind of share that as well, so people can take advantage of it.
I'll most definitely put it in the show notes on this one. I'll put it on the YouTube link and everything else. So, Paul, thank you so much, mate. Legend as always. And we'll catch up officially in the new year.
Amazing. Cheers, Chris.
Thanks so
Bye.
much.